20th, 2024. Notwithstanding the clock in the back of the room, which says it's almost 10:30. This is the time and place set for the regularly scheduled monthly meeting of the Department of Business and Industry's Taxicab Authority Board. We are at the Nevada State Business Center, 330 West Sahara, Suite 430, the Tahoe Room in Las Vegas, Nevada. I will call us to order. The record should reflect that present are Vice Chair Soderberg, members Graff, members Weekly, myself, Dan Reeser, Chair, and the Administrator, and our DAG is also present. Madam Secretary, we are recording?
Yes, we are.
We are. Okay. Then I will call us to order and ask Member Graff to lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Secretary, based on affidavits and notices of posting that you have provided to me, it appears that the meeting has been properly noticed and posted in accordance with the open meeting law. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That will take us to our first substantive agenda item, which is agenda item 2, which is public comment. The matter is set forth on our agenda pursuant to NRS Chapter 241, Nevada's open meeting law, for the purposes of taking comment from members of the public who wish to address the board on matters within its jurisdiction. We may not take action on any matter brought to our attention, but we do welcome members of the public either here physically present with us or who are participating remotely. Is there any member of the public who is present in Las Vegas who would wish to address us? Seeing a massive rush to the podium. Is there any member, Madam Secretary, or is there any member of the public, Madam Secretary, participating remotely who wishes to comment?
No.
Hearing none, I have a public comment. I would like to welcome Dr. Lawrence Weekly, who has recently been appointed as our newest member. We welcome you and we look forward to working with you. Dr. Weekly, I think, will be a great addition. He will provide, from his years of service to the Clark County Commission, the perspective of a local government and local interests that we don't really have on the existing membership, or mainly people who deal at the state government level. So we welcome you and look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that introduction. I sound larger than what I am, but okay, I'll take it this morning. Please excuse me, Mr. Chairman, my tie, I thought, it says, well, Taxicab Authority, do they wear ties at their meeting? And I thought, I went back and watched one of your meetings and I didn't see guys with ties on. So I was like, okay, I don't want to overdo it. And I get here, I'm like, oh God, really, first meeting. So please excuse me.
No problem. You may attire yourself however you think appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Any other member have comment? No comment? Okay, then I will close agenda item 2, public comment. Item 3 is review of the board minutes for the October 16th, 2024 meeting. Members of the board have had an opportunity to review these, with the exception of member Weekly, who did not participate. Are there any changes, additions, or corrections?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
I have none.
Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second the motion.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of October 16th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, again, because I was not a member of the board at this time, I'd like to abstain
Thank you.
on the minutes of the October 16, 2024 meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Takes us to agenda item 4. This is a matter regularly put on our agenda for industry discussion, allowing members of the industry to bring to our attention comments, questions, concerns, ongoing discussions of proposed regulation or other industry-related matters. Is there any member of the industry who would like to address us at this time? Take it everything's going swimmingly. Seeing none, that concludes agenda item 5. Excuse me, agenda item 4 takes us to agenda item 5. This is the continued public hearing of the board's initiated proposed future special events surcharge. As you will recall, we've had this on the agenda for a number of occasions. We recently entered a order on the upcoming F1 Grand Prix, and right, has it already occurred?
Not quite.
This week.
It's just like a week,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay. We have before us, pardon?
It's going now, isn't it?
Maybe the
Thursday.
preliminaries or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
The main events this weekend. We have before us a proposed findings, fact, conclusions of law, and order from staff that provides for an order for a 1-year period, I believe, that identifies what would be considered the special events during that 1-year period. It would be F1, EDC, and the board also the staff also proposes, and I'll turn this over to the administrator in a moment. The staff also proposes, as they intimated last month, a venue-related surcharge for the Sphere, T-Mobile, and Allegiant Stadium. The Sphere at $20, T-Mobile at $15, and Allegiant at $15. And they propose this to remain in effect for 25 and 26. Administrator, would you like to give us any other thoughts on this draft?
Thank you, Chairman. Together with my staff, and also with the industry, briefly about my ideas on the venue. I agree that EDC and F1 work. We've seen them work last year. I expect them to work going forward, and so I have no problems having that remain in place the way we've done it in the past. The reason I wanted to talk about the venues is because a lot of the complaints that we receive at the Taxicab Authority is from people that are not here for a specific event, but they're getting charged surcharge. That happened especially during March Madness this last year. People were in town not for going to the casinos and laying down a bet for March Madness, and they were getting charged a surcharge while they were in a cab. So my idea was to make it more venue specific. So if you're going to an Eagles concert at the Sphere, a cab going to the Sphere is going to get that surcharge because it's for the people that are at the Sphere are the ones that need the transportation. And so my family that's coming from Wyoming who's in town to put a $5 bet on a blackjack table, they're not getting charged that unless they're going to the Eagles concert. And I felt that the 3 venues that were really important were the Sphere, T-Mobile Arena, and Allegiant Stadium, because those are the largest venues, and those are the venues that have the largest events. And so that was what I wanted to propose to the board to get your thoughts on that as well.
I'll open up if there's any member of the public who or the industry that's present that wants to address us on this. And I will acknowledge Ms. Go ahead and make your appearance.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. Welcome, new board member Weekly. For the record, I'm Kimberly Maxon Rushton with the law firm Cooper Levinson, appearing on behalf of the Livery Operators Association. Joining me today are the representatives. To my right is Mr. Rich Franks on behalf of Desert Cab and Virgin Valley. Cheryl Gibbons on behalf of Whittlesey Blue Cab and Henderson Taxi. And then Mr. Michael Balin on behalf of Taxi Management at Yellow Checker Star and New Cab. As noted, Chairman, prior to this meeting, or actually following the last meeting, at your direction and the direction of staff, the industry did get together and meet. We discussed specifically the 2025 proposed surcharge schedule. And what we did, just for purposes of the record, is we started by looking at the 2024 surcharges, whether or not they worked, specifically the events that were selected, the price ranges, or the amount of the surcharge fee, the geographic area, and whether or not there were complaints from consumers. And overall, I would like to submit that we believe that the surcharges worked. The objective was to incentivize drivers to work during peak periods so that members of the traveling public and guests to our city had available safe transportation and were not forced to otherwise get into illegal vehicles and ride with illegal operators. And that's a significant part of this discussion today. Because as we move forward with the 2025 and you hear from the industry, one of the primary concerns and one of the, I guess, additional objectives, other than just incentivizing the drivers, is to really provide transportation services in certificated carrier vehicles. The number of illegal operators that continue to operate here in Clark County, unbridled and transporting passengers, is off the charts. Earlier this month at an MTA meeting, there was a 3-hour presentation about the number of illegal operators specifically operating here in Clark County, in and around the Strip and the Golden Triangle. Those are the reasons why, in part, you'll hear from the industry today, why we have proposed what I would say are somewhat varied surcharge events. Historically, what you've seen are specific events such as the F1 and EDC. What you see in the memorandum that we submitted to staff are a number of conventions. And there's a specific reason for that. And I think in addition to the comments in the proposal by staff, I'd ask that you also consider what the LOA presents relative to the conventions. Not only is it important because of the massive amount of people and the transportation logistics, but again, keeping in mind the number of illegal operators that operate during those periods and are transporting people without insurance, without any background, drivers that we don't know whether or not they're safe, and all of the other concerns that we have relative to illegal operators. So at this time, Chairman, with your permission, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Frakes, and he'll start the discussion, then we'll go from there.
Okay, good.
No, I'm
I'll
sorry.
defer to
sorry.
You're gonna yield the floor to.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We'll refer to Cheryl.
She usually sits on the right.
Thank you.
Well, and as the board is aware, but Member Weekly, you're new, so I'm going to go back a little bit. We have all previously testified before the board the challenges that we do face in trying to get drivers to work for us versus the TNCs who offer dynamic pricing, or even worse, as a gypsy cab, which are both illegal and unregulated. We have provided evidence to this board and staff following the F1 race in 2023, the Super Bowl, March Madness, and EDC in 2024, showing that the surcharges that we put in place did indeed incentivize drivers to work for us. The stats that we showed the board showed that more drivers worked and we put out more shifts than we did in the prior year when there was no surcharge in effect. So we've got a lot of asks today for the board, and we're going to spread them out between all of us. First, in order to, I haven't seen the proposed order that staff has presented. So I just want to reiterate what we were going to do for EDC and F1 so that we have a good record with the chairman's approval. So we would ask that the board approve an EDC 2025 surcharge of $40 for trips dropping at the venue and $60 for trips originating at the venue on the following dates and times. Friday, 5/16 from 3 p.m. through Saturday, 5/17 at 10 a.m. Saturday, 5/17 at 3 p.m. through Sunday, 5/18 at 10 a.m. Sunday, 5/18 at 3 p.m. through Monday, 5/19 at 10 a.m. This coincides with the rates that were approved for 2024. Second, we ask the board's approval for an F1 2025 surcharge for $15 for trips originating and or terminating within the Strip Airport corridor, or 1 a.m. on 11/19/2025 through 12 noon, 11/24/25, which also coincides with what was approved for 2024 that's going to be happening this week. Having said that, moving forward, we've met to discuss, as Kimberly has stated, the special events that we as an industry have had challenges with in providing transportation. It is much easier when it's busy in town for drivers to simply pick up and drop off on the Strip versus deadheading to venues to pick up during conventions. Drivers want to make the fastest, easiest money that they can. And there's nothing wrong with that. When it's busy in town, when there are conventions, the Strip and the downtown area are just as busy. It doesn't behoove a driver to deadhead to the LVCC versus going ahead and being able to pick up, drop off, and pick up again on the Strip. It just doesn't make sense for them to do so and then wait in line for a ride. When these events are in town, the Las Vegas Convention Center, the Mandalay Bay Convention Center, and the Sands Expo are constantly calling the cab companies and sending out blast text messages requesting cabs. Now, although we do send that information to our drivers, we can't force them, especially the lease drivers, to go and actually pick up these rides. The drivers are going to go where the quickest and the easiest money is. It's up to us to incentivize them and make a change. We need to provide them an incentive to service these convention attendees at these venues, instituting a nominal surcharge during this event, which will only affect people that are attending these venues for these specific events, will not affect other people that are here just enjoying Las Vegas. And we won't see the complaints that we saw during March Madness, where people that were not here for that event suffered the surcharge as well. So third, we are requesting a $5 surcharge for rides that drop off at these venues during these events that I will list, and a $10 surcharge for rides that pick up at these venues. The reason that we're asking for $10 for the pickup is that drivers are going to have to make a conscious choice to leave an area where they know it is busy and deadhead to these venues to pick up these individuals to transport them from these venues. Incentivizing them to do that versus just staying on the Strip, the only way that we can do that is with that additional money. So these events have an expected attendance of 75,000 or more in 2025 and are as follows. CES, January 6th through January 10. The SHOT Show and World of Concrete, January 21 through January 26. The National Association of Broadcasters, April 6th through April 10th. And the SEMA Automotive Aftermarket Show, November 1st through November 8th. I do not see that we need a specific time regarding these events as we do for some of the others, because we're looking at specific venues. And if someone is going to the Las Vegas Convention Center at 1 in the morning, for whatever reason, during this time frame, they should be paying that surcharge. This will be less complicated and easier for the riding public to understand as well. And for our next ask, I defer to Rich.
Right. So I just want to, like Rich Frakes, I just want to emphasize her about the venues. You know, we got together about the 75,000 because I think that that's a significant amount of attendees for a venue. It's going to incentivize the drivers, number one, to go pick them up instead of go get 2 rides on the Strip. They can go fight the traffic to get to go pick up 1 ride at the convention center. So I think that that $10 surcharge, $5 surcharge is going to actually incentivize the drivers to do that. New Year's Eve, we talked about having a New Year's Eve surcharge because of just like the F1, the Strip's closed off. It's hard to get around. It's really hard for us to get drivers year after year after year. It's been harder to get drivers to work that week because they always want off. It's a week after Christmas. At Desert Cab, we give everybody off the week before Christmas, and then we make them all come back to work on the 26th. So we're trying to get them guys to come back. As they're coming back, we want them to be able to get incentivized to fight the traffic around the Strip. It's only for people going to and from the Strip. It's not outside of the Strip. We spoke about the small venues. the T-Mobile, the Sphere, and Allegiant Stadium. Number one, they don't have cab stands. They have hotels adjacent to the venues, and we feel that people can walk to those venues. As you know, it's a no hail, right? You can't hail a cab here. In fact, the Sphere just closed the cab stand that they put up for us during just the next week until I think the 7th of December, they closed the cab stand. So there is no cab stand at the Sphere for us to pick up. But you can walk to the Venetian or the Wynn and pick up. Those venues are small. You know, I think the Sphere only holds about 17,000 people. Same with T-Mobile, only holds 17,000 people. Hockey is probably one of the biggest events that are there. 75% of those people are local, so they all drive there. Not really a taxi person. You noticed, well, I don't know if you noticed, but the rodeo is coming next week, right? The first week. There's a lot of people come to that. They say there's 102,000 people supposed to just do the Cowboy Christmas, but those 100,000 people are going through there through the week, not through one day, right? And Thomas & Mack Center. Thomas & Mack holds 19,000 people. So during the rodeo, the 19,000 people is just as big as the Sphere, T-Mobile, but we seem to have no problem getting taxis there to pick up and drop off because there's a taxi place to load and unload there. So, and it's because the Thomas & Mack actually recognizes the fact that they need taxis, right? So that's about all I got for you.
Good morning, board. Michael Balin, Yellow Checker Star, new cabs 1, 2, 3, and 4. I agree with everything both Cheryl and Rich said. The problem with the venues that Todd's suggesting is the drivers just can't get there. And it's a real problem. Our drivers try to take customers there. Traffic's bad, customer hops out, and the driver gets cited. So even with a surcharge, it's going to be a losing proposition for them. And doing it by what we've recommended here, it just gets more drivers on the road. Right now, we've got approximately 2,200 plus drivers. Over half of those drivers are either flex drivers or independent contractors. And so it's not just as important to get them out there, it's to get them out there at the right time. These surcharges will help do that. And I don't know about the other companies, but our independent contractors, they're getting 100% of any surcharge. So this is not benefiting the company. It's just helping to get more drivers out on the road. And we've seen it, it works. It definitely works. Our Flex program is kind of our answer to Uber. Come drive our cab. It's our cab, it's our insurance, it's our fuel, our maintenance, repair. You don't have any financial responsibilities on it. It's all on us. But the one thing that's missing is if Uber's surcharging and we're not, they're going to go work for Uber that day. So I think it's going to help make our industry a lot stronger if we go with our recommendation. Thank you.
So Chairman, based on the testimony that you heard today, I would just note for the record that in the memo, we are removing the event or the convention identified as services/LB market/ARA. It's my understanding, Cheryl, that it's spread out over a number of properties.
It's venues that are not included, and as well, it did not reach the 75,000 attendee threshold that we as a group had decided upon.
And with that, as always, we're happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Before we ask questions, Administrator, your thoughts, if you have any.
Well, I would like to say that I agree that the surcharges did work. And the whole time this has been about getting drivers to drive for the cabs instead of going out. Anytime you go out to a cab company, you can see the parking lot Lyft and Uber stickers in most of their drivers' cars. So that's what they're doing as their part-time job. So it's important for the cab companies to be able to get drivers to drive the cabs instead of going and getting in their personal cars and going in. when they're not working for the cab companies. I understand Rich's thoughts on T-Mobile and Allegiant. They aren't big cab stands. There is a cab stand over at Allegiant. It's just really hard to find.
It's hard to get to.
Or use.
Yeah, exactly.
Or allowed to.
Yeah, so I understand the concerns. My concern is I don't want people getting the surcharge that aren't at a specific event. And that was, again, one of the biggest complaints that we had was people were getting the surcharge when they weren't having anything to do with why the surcharge was on. And so I guess those are my thoughts.
Questions?
At some point after we've had our discussion, I wouldn't mind a summary of what we're voting on. Because I've got a memo over here, I've got an order over here, and I'm having problems mixing the two. And then I think you've amended this. I think before we actually make a motion, somebody should tell us what's in, what's out, or what's our consideration.
Concur if we even take action.
Exactly.
All right, I have a couple of questions also. And my first question was, I was going to ask Ms. Webb as to what all of that is not included in your proposed order. And I'm seeing there's a lot.
Most of it, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I would like to consider is in that order, there is no mention as to any limitation as to the location. So I want to have some discussion about the destination charges. And is that just like going forward forever, or at least this 1 year period, or what are we talking about?
Just a 1 year period through 2025, which is why for the specific events, I listed the dates so that it would be on the record, but these would only be through 2025.
But my point is there's no limitation, no matter when or if they drop off or pick up at the Sphere, they're going to charge you the $5 or the $10.
Well, it would be the Las Vegas Convention Center, Mandalay Bay Convention Center, and the Sands Expo. Any pickup there would be a $10 surcharge, regardless of drop-off location, in addition to the metered fare. And on the flip side, any drop-off from any pickup location, drop-off at the Sands Expo, Las Vegas Convention Center, or Mandalay Bay Convention Center would be $5.
And member Graf, that's with respect to the specific conventions that are identified.
Yes.
As to the venue, that's a different discussion. And again, I would just note the fact that the industry wanted to be as narrow as we could with respect to the surcharges and really look at what were the events, what were the specific conventions in town in which we have the hardest time activating drivers to get to those properties. Where are the biggest complaints? And they seem to come from the conventions. You have 75,000 people, 98% of which are not from Las Vegas. So they're all at one venue and they're all leaving at one time. That was the basis of why we selected the conventions, because it truly is a difficult logistically to get in and out or to incentivize them. And there's the most need. Let me give you an example. So for both the Golden Knights games as well as the Raider games, you have direct route service from RTC and the surrounding areas for members of the community. For NFR, they're offering a shuttle service for members of the community and to and from the Strip. So we've looked at those options for our locals to ensure that there is traffic or transportation available for them. It just doesn't seem to rise to a level at those specific venues to warrant the surcharge because of the fear that the locals will retaliate, or not retaliate, but they will complain about it. And because of the fact that you have more concentration of locals at those events, smaller number of people coming out, and more options in terms of transportation. So you come out of T-Mobile, you can go over to the park or to the New York and catch a cab. Same with the Sphere. You can go to Venetian or to the Wynn. So those were the factors we took into consideration. Certainly do not oppose having a surcharge for peak events and venue specific, but what we tried to do is make it as narrow as possible, just recognizing where the real need is and not go beyond that so that we didn't warrant any complaints from consumers and from members of the public here in Las Vegas.
So another question that I had was when we were talking before about these threshold events, we were talking about a figure, I think, of 100,000. Where are we getting the 75 or 100,000? Are these in data that's published by the LVCVA, or where are we getting these numbers?
The numbers some numbers are published by LVCVA after the fact. They used to populate their convention calendar online. COVID changed that. So what we looked at, and I had met with Administrator Parks prior to the meeting to explain to him why I included NAB. NAB's numbers historically can go anywhere from 66,000 to up to 85,000. But NAB is handled at the Las Vegas Convention Center. And based on the fact that we get, like I said, the phone calls, the blast texts during NAB that they need 50 cabs at the South Hall. That's what we based these, that's why it's so narrow, and there's only 4. Of all of the conventions that arrive here in Las Vegas, we took the 4 largest. Obviously, Con Expo is huge, but Con Expo only comes every 2 years. Since we're only planning this for a year, I did not include it. CES is estimated to be at 138,000 attendees. The SHOT Show and World of Concrete, 117,000. NAB, as I stated, goes anywhere between that range. But because it is such a huge convention, I explained to Administrator Parks why I included it in my list. The SEMA and Automotive Aftermarket Week is 160,000 attendees.
How's that compared to G2E?
G2E is not a huge draw for the cabs.
Right.
It's more actually for the limos and the shuttle buses. I hate saying that in this venue, but that's just the truth.
No. Different clientele. Okay. Okay.
But they do publish, I actually brought
Okay.
something that gets published through the LVCVA.
After
So,
the
like-
fact, after the fact, right?
Well, no, this is actually the
This
first
is
week of December. Like
Yeah.
sometimes the venue will, or the show will
The
publish
show.
how many people are coming, like AWS, which is Amazon's service, web service. They have 51,000 people going to be at the Sands. At the same time, MJ BizCon, the marijuana business thing, is going to be 30,000 at the convention center. Those were together, so that's 80,000 people basically within a couple blocks of each other. But we didn't pick those because they're at 2 different venues.
Is that something that we can make part of the record?
You mind?
No.
Do we know why the cab stand closed at the Sphere?
Get to it. Drivers can't
Everything's
get
blocked
Let me
out.
ask a better question. That's my fault. Who closed the cab stand at the Sphere?
This year, no.
There it is. We got an email.
Okay. What'd the email say?
Curtis actually sent it out.
Mr. McGrath, I can speak to that. Specifically, the Spear taxi stand was closed in recognition of F1. And as we've talked about before with the issues with the Sphere, logistically, it has been almost impossible for taxis to navigate to that taxi stand. That was part of the discussion during the NTA meeting 2 weeks ago, in which the limos testified that they had tried on multiple occasions to bring in high recognized customers and everything in limos, and that they were told, you can only go into this area, this commercial lot, if you own a box or you pay me $50. It was on video. They had, you probably had at least 7 carriers show up at the NTA and testify to the fact that that's specifically what happened and what a nightmare it is to navigate anything at the Sphere. Following that, I met with Administrator Park. We discussed the issues with the Sphere specific to the complaint that they had about the taxis, what was testified to during the NTA meeting, and we're following up with that. So hopefully at the December meeting, we'll have some further information, but we're trying to address these issues without doing it with the surcharge attached to it.
I'd like to just add, I spoke with the people at the Sphere regarding what Ms. Rushton just mentioned, as well as when I was thinking about the venue. And I was told that they would be just fine with having a surcharge from the Sphere, because you have 400 or 500 people out there waiting for cabs and there's no cabs there. They just want to get home or back to their hotel or whatever. So a larger fee for that venue, they don't feel is going to be an issue at all. The taxi cab stand is going to be shut down as long as F1 is here. because the stand is right there by the track, or part of the year it's right on the track. And so they have to shut it down. And I think what Rich said, December 7th, I was thinking December 6th, but that's when it's going to open back up again. But that's not, the location of the stand is great. It's getting in and out of the venue that's the biggest issue. I had one of my supervisors try to get in there and they were stuck on sands for a long time. I don't know exact amount of time, but it was a long time just to get to the venue and then to get back out. And it's just it's a difficult area to get cabs and limos and buses and whoever in and out of that venue. And honestly, it's difficult at Legion Stadium and T-Mobile as well.
So would the industry be open to limiting the time that we charge the pickup and drop off, like say for the Sphere, to say 3 hours before an event and 2 hours after?
For our part at Whittlesey and Henderson, we're not opposed to anything that Administrator Parks is offering at this time. We just don't know that logistically that is going to do it, because it's one thing to have the ingress and egress at the Las Vegas Convention Center or the Sands Expo, which, as everyone knows, is a nightmare. But the difficulty in getting in to try to stage for leaving the event, I think, is going to be more of a problem than dropping off. So, just for the record, Whittlesey and Henderson's not opposed to this. I just think that we need to actually have better communication with these venues, similarly to what we have at Mandalay Bay Convention Center, Sands Expo, and the LVCC, to get that dialogue going and saying, look, we're going to do this. We're going to do everything in our power to help you guys out. You've got to give a little as well and try to work this out so that we can then educate our drivers. Hey, we've gotten together, with these venues, as we have in the past with those other venues, and now we have a plan, and this is what we're going to move forward with. And I think that'll make it easier for everyone to accept, especially the drivers.
For all three, Administrator Parks recommending, I think the Sphere would be the one that we would get the most value out of once the taxi cab stand is put back in place and the roads are opened up after F1. Allegiant and T-Mobile, it's impossible to get there. I don't know if it would help at all.
Weekly, do you have any questions? It's probably unfair. You're weighing in
Okay.
after a year of.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the question from Member Graff. In terms of how we differentiating, in terms of looking at picking and choosing some of the spots that we're going to go to, I'd like to know a little bit more about that. But I'd also, Mr. Park, I'm a little kind of confused in terms of the recommendation that you provided to us. Help me understand, what your recommendation is today based on the industry's ask. I think the industry have provided us some good data, and it's even disaggregated, which makes me better understand. The only thing I'm trying to understand, Ms. McElroth, is Allegiant. I want to know more about Allegiant, and Mr. Chairman, I'll disclose for the record, I'm a member of the board of Allegiant Stadium, and so I'd like to know a little bit more about why is it so difficult, and what is it that we could do to remedy that? And I'll reach out to Steve Hill and see if he can address
I
it.
can just interject.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Rich Frakes, Desert Cab. Part of the problem with the Legion is when the cab drivers go to drop off there, there's no specific spot to drop. So if they drop off anywhere, of course, they're a taxi. So TNCs are dropping off everywhere. Everybody's dropping off everywhere, but a taxi's just a taxi. It's got a big sign on it, all color. So they get pulled over by the police, and then they get hassled. I just had a guy 2 weeks ago got pulled over by the police. He said he was arguing with him because he wouldn't give him his driver's license. I have video showing that he did. He called the Taxicab Authority. The Taxicab Authority came out and wrote him another ticket. So he got 2 tickets. One ticket for dropping off in the wrong spot and 1 ticket for arguing with the cop. So now he got $600 ticket. So now he's got to pay that. So now he's like, well, I'm not going to go back to the Legion because every time I drop off there, I get a ticket. So I'm not going to do that.
Thank you for that. And then last question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
You had indicated that this is 1 year. Is this a pilot, or what are we doing for it?
It would be considered a pilot program with regards to the events that I specified. Since we have already had EDC and F1 from my perspective, I would not consider those for 2025 to be a pilot, as we've already received board approval for those in the past.
And then after the 1 year, if in fact it appears to be favorable for the industry, you'd come back and work with Administrative Park to come before this board and ask if you could, extend it or?
Well, we would need new dates for 2026 because the actual dates for these events do fluctuate. And so we would have to meet with the administrator, come up with a plan for 2026, and then present that to the board at the end of 2025 as well.
I appreciate that.
So
So, Mr.
also-
Chair, I think I just maybe say to you, if I can have a recommendation, where's staff coming from? Because I'm more interested in what staff is asking.
So for your benefit, in previous hearings on this same matter, weekly, the board indicated that it was not inclined to issue an order that had a longer time period than 1 year.
1 year, yes, sir.
So that we could assess statistically. We did do pilots. We've done several pilots, EDC, F1, and
Super Bowl American.
and Super Bowl to gather statistics to test the proposition that did it make more drivers work? And I think the record shows that it did do that. So at this point, what we're trying to do is fashion a first 1 year order, because the other ones have all been very specific orders for one event, one point in time. I have a couple questions. I struggle with New Year's Eve. I need to understand what your logistics challenge is. What gets closed down? The whole strip?
Yes, the whole,
From where to where?
from Mandalay Bay to the Sahara Hotel.
Okay.
It's a nightmare. Nobody wants to work anymore on it.
Okay, so that's all just walking traffic.
Correct.
So your pickup and drop up is like on Harmon and is that Dean Martin on, I mean, is that how you, or are you just not providing service?
You can go like Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so you can drop people off on Frank Sinatra, but imagine there's a million cars there
Right.
on both sides, right? So Harmon on Frank Sinatra and the adjacent, I think all the way down to Industrial, because it kind of goes down to the Sahara Hotel.
So, because I've had the wisdom in 42 years never to go to the strip on New Year's Eve. Sounds like amateur night to me, but so you're basically saying is it that the board should just abandon that as
No,
as a service opportunity? I mean, because I'm trying to figure out, sounds to me like you'd need $100 surcharge to get somebody to go through that business.
right. Well, that's why we were only asking for $10.
Yeah,
But for them to work, it's like, it's going to be that extra. It's almost like, Uber and Lyft are surging during that time
Yeah.
to drop people off. So it's only affecting the people that get dropped off or picked up on the strip. So it's not, Mrs. Smith wants to go from Red Rock to the Durango station, she's still going to be able to go there. But it's the other guys that just want to go to, they want to get dropped off on the strip. So it's our guys fighting to get there.
So like EDC, we geolocate.
Correct.
So on the venues that the administrator has identified, since I've gotten on the board, I have heard from a number of sources about the problems of cab service at Allegiant. And I've also heard directly from people about Sphere. I haven't heard a lot of issues about T-Mobile. But it seems like it falls in the same conceptual framework to me. My impression of Sphere and Allegiant that it is largely a problem that the venues have not dedicated space for drop off and pickup by cabs.
Correct.
It's kind of just a free for all at both locations. Is that a correct?
Yes, that's a fair assessment.
So for those two venues at least, because I do get, let me say, I do get on T-Mobile that you are right next to two properties where there are cab stands. So I get there's a distinction there. There's not, if you don't have a cab stand at Sphere, and this, I know you can walk, but I'm told it's kind of a dangerous walk, or it's a difficult walk. I don't know how accurate that is. But it seems to me, unless we get cooperation from the two venues, I think what the industry is telling us is that there's not enough money in that surcharge to go through the pain.
Correct.
And
I have likewise, I'm also going to say, likewise, anecdotally heard from the convention center operators about need for cabs not being serviced. And as some people in the room, Vice Chair will remember, we took a bunch of evidence on that when we had a certificate application a couple of years ago about non-service. So I'm open to the thought that we ought to maybe look at convention authority service. To Vice Chair Soderberg's point, I'm not sure we're at a point to vote on something yet, because I think we need to give some additional guidance to staff about what more we would want in this kind of an order, and whether or not we want to do a pilot on New Year's Eve or a pilot on one of these before we actually put them into an annual order. So I just open those issues up. Ms. Webb, I appreciate you have struggled mightily with us through 4 hearings now, and order seems to change every time. So we appreciate you trying to keep up with us, but we are going from baby steps to, I think, a bigger step here, where we're going to put something in place for a year. Not that we couldn't revisit it if we wanted to, but that would kind of defeat the purpose of doing the year-long test. So anyway, thoughts from other board members?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. I don't think we're ready to vote because we have all of these parts. And I worry that if we came up with a motion, then staff in the industry have to figure out what the hell we did. So at minimum, I'd like to see at the next meeting, 1 document. And if that document needs to be amended, we could hear that from industry or from staff. I think I've been clear since we've been doing this that I think these surcharges are a good thing. I think our inclination is to maybe be miserly on this because we feel we're protecting the consumer. In reality, I think this whole item is to be assisting our drivers. Continually hear family members, friends, anecdotally, that every time we have a big event, you turn on the TV and we had all these hundreds of millions of economic impact. Service industry people didn't make any more money. They worked harder, they didn't make any more money. So I, speaking as one member of 5, I think actually the 2 documents we have before us might be a little conservative. Not that I'm going to tinker with it, because the last time I did it, it didn't work out so good. So I've learned to back. But my gut is we should have surcharges. We should err on having them for many events at many locations. and we should err on being too high. And then if we find out it's too high, we can always adjust in the future. In the meantime, those people driving behind the wheel will be making more money during these events and going to locations that are hard to get to. And I don't see that changing. You know, anybody who's lived in Las Vegas for decades remembered when you can park in front of a hotel and then walk to 3 others, or just take your car and drive half a block and park. Now everything, and you know, as real estate becomes more and more, nobody's going to have a big cab stand. And if they do, it's going to be in some awkward spot. There'll be a choke point. That's just the way it is. It's going to get worse, not better. And so we have to incentivize the drivers to do this, because we know that the rideshare folks are incentivizing their drivers to do it at a much generous level than what we have prevented for us here. So that's my 2 cents for whenever we wind up voting. I'm not going to worry that we have too many events or too many surcharges. I think our constituency is not as much the out-of-state tourists as it is the drivers who are behind the wheel.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to try and emphasize too is how, and I'm optimistic that new member Weekly is a member of the Allegiant board, is how do we incentivize the locations? So it's not just incentivizing drivers, it's not just do we take care of our consumers, but, and hop on that same soapbox, you know, we got a new facility that's going to be built here in the next couple of years, and we've got to address that one and see if we can maybe change things so that it is, and give the locations something so that we get something in return.
Any other thoughts?
I appreciate both comments, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Soderberg. I've known for years and have followed his.
You won't
wisdom.
hold that against him?
I won't. I just have a lot of respect for him and followed his wisdom for a long time, and so I can concur with the recommendations.
So in summary, I think the direction back to staff is to take another swing at the order based on what you've heard today. I do want to say, I don't disagree that one of our constituencies is the drivers, and we're trying to motivate drivers to work. But I see that as, I guess this is the economist, and the ultimate purpose of that is to take care of the traveling public and to give them options of a licensed and permitted person in a licensed and permitted vehicle. No disrespect to our sister agency that is a different type of transportation in spades. So I think there's dual economic purpose here. With that, if there's nothing further, we'll move on to the next agenda item. And do you need some additional?
I would just like a little clarification.
For sure.
The way I'm understanding this is the board and member Soderberg.
Yep.
Sounds like we want to expand. So potentially it could be both what the industry has proposed as well as what I proposed in a conglomeration.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we could probably.
I think we need to meet again.
And I'll just to speaking as one board member, and I know you did this previously, Ms. Webb, grappling with, is 75,000 the right number? Is it multiple venues at the same time that are more than 75,000? That lots of levers that we've heard here. I think Member Soderberg's right. We may want to err on the side of being a little more aggressive given the TNCs. But also you need to keep it administratively effective. You have to be able to effectively administrate what we're doing. The one thing I would notice, or one thing I would observe, which was my final statement, and that was in the draft order, you don't specify the dates of the events. You just say the Thursday or the Friday. I think we ought to specify the dates and the times because it's going to be just an annual order.
Okay, because I had written it that if no one asked for a change for the next year, it would just be the same order for
Yeah.
2026. And we all know what the Thursday before is going to be now, but we won't know it's for the next year. So it might just be easy to write it the way it is.
I'm only worried about disputes. So we can give thought to that. I don't know how big of an issue this is. Anything else on this agenda?
Amounts. So the amounts in the memo and the amounts in the order are different.
Yeah.
So, I'm leaning towards Member Soderberg's comments or Vice Chair Soderberg's comments on the more incentive to the driver. So just, if we could just be, whatever we get in the future, consistent.
Sure. To the extent that you can, not suggesting you have to. If there's a form of order that has gotten endorsement from the industry, or at least maybe share the draft. And for the record, I directed not to because I didn't know where we were headed today. But I think given the discussion today, that way the LOA can identify for us in writing in advance if it has objections to the order and what they are. And I think that may be helpful for us in going through and actually issuing an order next time. Anything else? Great. That'll conclude our discussions on agenda item 5. That takes us to agenda item 6, which is review and consideration of a draft advisory opinion pursuant to the application of relief by the LOA on interpretation of some matters related to leasing. We do have a draft opinion that is before us, complied with the regulations requirement to circulate it among members of the board for comment. Those comments have all been directed to Ms. Webb and not shared among members. For the purposes of the record, I will read the question presented and the answer just so that this is not a complete black box. The question presented is whether a taxi cab driver may also be an independent contractor, driver in quotes, an independent contractor in quotes, to whom a certificate holder may, upon approval from the taxi cab authority, lease a cab as authorized by section 706.88396 of the Nevada Revised Statute. The answer, short answer, is NRS 706.88396 authorizes a taxi cab lease by a certificate holder to a quote independent contractor end quote. An independent contractor, for the purposes of that statute, explicitly excludes drivers employed to operate a taxi cab by the same certificate holder leasing to the independent contractor. Be happy to take comment, but under the applicable regulation, it's really to the board to make a determination as to whether it wants to issue the opinion. So go ahead, Ms.
Chairman, for the record, Kimberly Maxon Rushton with the law firm Cooper Levinson, appearing on behalf of the Livery Operators Association. As you articulated, this was an advisory opinion that was submitted to the board for consideration as to whether or not a certificated carrier could have both an employee driver as well as an independent driver operating for their company. As we articulated in the request for the advisory opinion, we believe that the regulation allows for that. We believe that when we promulgated the specific regulation or statutes that allows a taxi company to use independent contractor lease drivers, that was contemplated. And for those reasons, we submitted in the request for advisory opinion that you, in your review, consider both the legislative history, the intent of the industry with respect to the specific statute, and then the fact that since 2015, this has been an interpretation and application of those specific regulations. And so you have operators who have had drivers who are both employees and independent contractors operate within their company on separate days. As we articulated at the last board meeting, there are specific reasons for this and why we believe that it's in the best interest not only of the carrier, but it also adheres to the safety of the traveling public because of the fact you have greater oversight of the hours of service of those drivers. Lastly, the most, I think, important point is the fact that it dovetails off of the last discussion. The intent is to keep drivers within the taxi industry and not have them go work for the TNCs or operate off hours illegally. And so for those reasons, we believe that, again, the regulation is clear. It allows for it. I think as we also discussed at the last board meeting, if there is any ambiguity that the board sees relative to this regulation, there's an easy fix. You can do a petition to deviate, ask to deviate from that specific regulation to allow the carriers to do what they've been doing since 2015, 17. And then thereafter, go forward with a temporary regulation that clears it up. I mean, most importantly, it's for the safety of the traveling public. It's to incentivize drivers to stay within the taxi industry. And it ensures that owner carrier has the ability to properly see the hours of service and ensure that the driver is not working beyond those that is set forth in the statutes and otherwise making them unsafe to the traveling public. And so with that, happy to answer any questions that you may have, Chairman.
Anything from the administrator?
My position is the same. I don't disagree with what Ms. Rushton said. I also want to see more drivers driving cabs. But I just felt that the statute was specific and that's weird.
Questions, board members?
My question, I guess, would be to Administrator Park. If we adopt this advisory opinion, what are you going to do?
I would allow them to be both an independent contractor and a driver with the same company.
Okay. That seems contrary to what's written
No,
here.
that's not what the opinion, draft opinion says, that they would have to be a independent contractor for, if they're a driver with company A, they'd have to be an independent contractor with certificate B.
Yeah.
They can't be with the same.
That's my understanding. Maybe I misunderstood
Okay.
the question, but if the board ruled that that's what you wanted, that's what we would enforce.
So my question is, if we adopt this document, what does that say to you in practice?
That they can't do it.
Right, and that's how I read it. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I apologize. I misunderstood the
Okay.
question.
You were saying if we adopted Ms. Rushton's position.
Correct.
You would
Okay.
follow, yeah, you really don't have any choices. Statute requires you to follow the advisory.
Right, right.
I don't have any other questions. I guess I've got comments, but wait till the rest of the board, if we had questions, I would change my comments based on those answers.
I didn't have any questions regarding the advisory opinion. I thought it was very well written and reasoned. I think any comment or discussion is on a policy side and or a going forward side.
So if there are not questions, I'll open it up to that discussion.
Well, as Member Graff said, I think this is very well written, very well reasoned. Thank you. It's a good piece of work. I just don't want to do it. I'm back, I'm a retired lawyer, so I haven't read any of these cases, but I remember the cases where courts and the like are basically admonished for having an absurd result, even though there's a plain meaning of some sort of statute or regulation. And I think if we adopt the letter of this document, we have an absurd result. We have companies, our certificated carriers, have been operating under an interpretation, or quite frankly, I don't know if it was an interpretation. I think nobody really read it. And I've seen that happen. It's not just here at the TA. I've been in regulation in a number of situations. I've dealt with a lot of statutes. I literally had somebody testify before me at the Public Utilities Commission who says, I don't know what the statute says, but I know what it meant when I wrote it. And there was some wordsmithing that happened over at LCB to really just make it the language consistent, and they changed everything. That happens. And I'm sensing that might have happened here. But the fact is, do we have an absurd result? We know that even with the economy not doing as well as it was a couple of years ago, it's a challenge to get drivers. We know that sometimes it's a challenge to be a driver. And I think if we adopt this interpretation, we're going to be prejudicing our certificated holders, making life more difficult to them, and the actual drivers who are following under this practice to try to maximize their income. Ironically, we're doing it right before the holidays, which kind of only hit me this morning. I said, oh God, why would I want to cut one of our drivers' income right before the holidays? So my gut feeling is the path forward is to do nothing on this. And I know that's not the best clean regulatory way to do it, and immediately start looking at a means to clean up this regulation. Because I just don't think that's what they meant when they passed it. Maybe they did. I wasn't there. I haven't talked to anybody, but it just didn't seem, I can't think of a public policy that the letter of that regulation would serve. Maybe there was something, but I can't think of it. And I think if we adopt this, now we're sitting here in the middle of November and we've upset the apple cart to the prejudice of both the companies and the drivers. And then we fix it down the road after everybody's lost out. I'd sooner do nothing. And I know we're in that weird period where we really can't adopt regs. I don't know if we could do a temporary reg or if we just have to wait a certain amount of time. But I'm happy with the status quo of how things are. And despite this, I couldn't have written one like this. This is very good. I don't like what it does. And so for me personally, I know it's not the quote right thing to do, but it's the right thing in the big picture for me.
I don't think that is the status quo. What's the status quo? Exactly, Administrator Park. What do you do? What is the agency doing today? Are they allowing drivers to be both independent contractors and drivers for the same company?
We have not stopped it. That's the status quo. We have not stopped it. But I will tell you that I'm young in this job, and I don't know what has gone on in the past. But when it came to me and I read the statute, I felt that it was specific, and that's why we're here.
Flies in the face of sometimes my outward appearance, as Ms. Rushton will tell you, and that is kind of a legal nerd. And words in here such as mutually exclusive and surplusage and a couple of other words that I had to Google are important. And the two, I agree with Vice Chair Soderberg. The two regulations, 706, 454 and 455, fly in the face of each other. At least common sense or ease for the industry, and I do get that. I think we all get that. Mrs. Rushton referenced the fact that they can apply for waivers and have those processed, or I think Vice Chair Soderberg mentioned a temporary regulation to add to that regulation to maybe further define the issue. But what is before us is a request for an advisory opinion, rightfully so. And it has been well-reasoned and written, and I think comes to the logical conclusion that it does. I guess my question to the chair is, what can we do other than adopt or reject this advisory opinion?
That's a great question.
Do you have, before I weigh in on that, do you have any other?
That's a great question. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate both comments from the gentleman here, and just on my limited knowledge of having read the opinion as well. I'm not the type of person that feels like just because this is how it's always been, this is how it should stay. I think we move with the times, and Ms. Rush and I like the idea of just ensuring that we do our best to save the industry. If some people out there had it their way, taxi cabs would go away. And I'm old school. I love a taxi cab. I mean, I just remember as a kid growing up here in Las Vegas on a school bus, and we would see the yellow taxi cabs, and we would freak out on the bus. And we loved seeing the yellow taxi cabs when we were kids. And to now, as a former commissioner who sat through hours of testimony. Lee, you remember those days when we listened to all the TNCs coming in and how is this going to work? And it's kind of weird to me. I've still never downloaded all the apps. Although I've ridden in Uber before. It's kind of weird. But I love our taxi cab industry here based on my experience with this chair. We're way better than they are in DC and other places I've been where they're rude as all outdoors, and there's not this type of autonomy that I've seen in other places that we have here. So you all have done a great job, in my opinion. I'd like to see some form of compromise cleanup here, Ms. Vice Chair, based on your recommendation. I think that there are some areas that we can infuse some of those things that Mr. Rush has put on the table here today, because I think it just moves us into the 21st century. But I appreciate Attorney Webb over there and the extensive work. Again, she was very patient with me, talking to me on the phone and just making sure that I kind of understood what I needed to understand. And then I did some inquiries from some other folks asking about this opinion. They've all agreed that this was well written. So thank you for that as well. So that's why I'm, Mr. Chair, just asking if there's some level of compromise here today.
So will come as no surprise that I put myself in Mr. Graff's corner as a legal nerd. And I think the opinion correctly decides charts the course. I understand your absurd result. Your absurd result as one of 67 rules, I believe now, of statutory construction, but the opinion, I think, deals with that. The opinion also recognizes that this is probably not conducive result, and suggests that rulemaking could be had. If Ms. Webb thinks or our DAG thinks I'm off the reservation, to the question asked, the administrative code requires that we act within no more than 120 days. We can extend the time period, though, by conducting a hearing, and we've extended the time period one time last month to get, and so we have a 120-day clock running. I haven't looked at
January 16th.
January 16th. Okay. Thank you for that. So we have some time. We could table this matter. The LOA could withdraw, could move to withdraw its petition and submit some other document with some other relief requested. I think that the more appropriate course of action that we table till the January when's the January meeting?
It's the 15th, so it's the day.
Oh, good. We're golden for a change. So we have a couple months to look at that. I'm not in any way, council, criticizing the approach that you took, but also know that asking for the advisory opinion also sets the board up for a petition for judicial review. And so I don't know if that, I don't want to forestall whatever mechanisms you wanted to use, but I can't fault the administrator for reading the law and saying, I don't think I can do this. And while I'm letting it happen, not your words, my words, I need air cover. And this isn't going to give him air cover. It's going to tell him to go in a different direction that he's in right now. So I think my recommendation to the board is that we move to table to the January 15th meeting and see if something relieves us of the obligation of doing something on January 15th. That will give the administrator and the agency the cover it needs, but also allow the industry to come up with a workaround.
Chairman, for the record, Kimberly Maxim Rushton. I will note the fact that it is a procedural quagmire. And the reason why is because the wonderful working relationship that the industry has with staff. When this matter came up with staff, they immediately called us and said, this is what our concern is. And not that we have a concern with its actual application, we have a concern with the language. So we discussed multiple ways in which to get this before the board for your review and consideration. The advisory opinion was kind of just a step to get it going and everything. So I know the fact that there really was not an intent in the event that the advisory opinion came out contrary to our position to take it up. We also did that for the purpose of the fact that we're in that blackout period relative to the ability to adopt regulations. Recognizing this probably does qualify for an emergency or in a temporary, just based on the fact that where we are in the community right now with the number of events, the need for drivers and all of those factors. But I was going to suggest, and we had discussed this earlier, is I was going to specifically ask that the matter be referred back to staff. We'll work with them. And then, as I noted before, there are alternative approaches that we can take immediately that would allow the status quo. And then we can move into a reg workshop with your permission and then fully vet this and correct the language. Because as I noted before, when this reg language was adopted, all of us in this room sat here and participated in. And that was the intent, was to allow as much flexibilities for these drivers and these carriers relative to the ability now to use independent contractor lease drivers. So recognizing that, again, I think it's notable the fact that staff had that concern, didn't want to just say no, but wanted to work through this with the board's approval. And I think that's the working relationship we should have. And so I support, obviously we've not seen a copy of the advisory opinion, but can infer from the discussion, what the findings are, what the opinion is. But we would respectfully request that the matter be referred back to staff and allow the industry to work with the administrator and staff in order to do a stopgap for now, to allow the process to continue and then promulgate regulations to clean up the language.
So my only suggestion is referral to staff is fine, but I think we need to table under that, the language of that specific regulation, which requires us as it's a shall, it's not a may. We shall act within 120 days. So I'd ask that any motion incorporate that it come back on January 15th so we comply with the regulation. We may not need to issue the opinion at that time. There may be something else in place that has relieved us, but we won't have violated the regulation and have Madam Deputy Attorney General chastising us.
How long is the temporary regulation effective?
So go ahead.
November 1 next year.
2025.
And that gets us through the blackout period and
Yeah.
gives us the ability to do the workshop and do the reg and all that stuff? Okay.
And sorry if I may add too, a request for a reg change can happen during this time and the board can vote to take that action, but it wouldn't happen until the time to do so. So that is something that can happen now, even though it's the blackout time.
Right. And that, just good point. That might mean that something needs to be on the December agenda. Just give some thought as to whether we need to approve something in December to be in the right position on January 15th. I leave that. Ms. Rushton's an expert in the area. She can guide everybody through that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other board comments? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take a stab at a motion. I think we're generally in agreement and generally feel like we're stuck in some mud. So let me try this, and if it doesn't work, we can flesh it.
Amend.
I would move that we table consideration of the draft proposed advisory opinion to our January 15th meeting and direct our staff to work with industry on either a short-term or a long-term solution to comport regulatory language with the accepted practice. Whether, and I don't want to say what that is because I don't know, and report back in our December meeting with a proposed way forward.
That sounds
Close enough?
And it,
But
From what-
wait, before we discuss, I need a second.
I'll second.
Discussion.
So just a point of clarification, I guess, is I think from what I heard from I'm sorry.
It's okay. My last name's Lee. Yeah.
Ms. Lee, is that our DAG is that we would have to do a temporary reg to allow the agency to process those licenses, and with the consideration that we would start a process to permanently change the regulation in the future. And that's the only qualification I would ask Vice Chair Soderberg would accept.
So before that discussion, my thought is that the motion is in proper form because it does not presuppose that a temporary regulation is the only solution, because there may be one or more additional solutions permitted by the regulations for a interim process.
Okay.
Our existing regulations. So I don't want to force one result versus another.
All right, I'll withdraw the request for clarification. I accept that.
Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. That takes us to agenda item 7, which is the public hearing on the application of WHCLV LLC DBA Z Trip for authority to acquire by sale and transfer the certificates of public convenience and necessity currently held by Wilsey Blue Cab and Henderson Taxi for us on an application by it was duly noticed duly noticed pursuant to the regulation on October 31st, 2024. For the record, staff will confirm we have received no petitions for leave to intervene. There are no petitions. Right, there are no petitions for leave to intervene, and member Graff has a disclosure.
I make a disclosure that the law firm of which I'm a member is representing one of the parties to this transaction, and therefore pursuant to NRS 281A 420, although I have no pecuniary interest and I have created a Chinese wall at my office, and I have not reviewed these materials, and I returned the email to Ms. Webb regarding additional materials yesterday and said I would not review, and I deleted. I am going to remove myself from this hearing and not have any consideration of the same.
Thank you, member. NRS 281A 420 subsection 5 provides that a recusal under that circumstance modifies the quorum as though that board member is, as though that position is vacant and there isn't a board member in that position. We have 3, and that is sufficient for a quorum to act. One other procedural matter before the question appearances begins. There, as the board members are aware, and as the applicant is aware, there are financial data and other proprietary information in our materials. If in processing this matter, a board member wants to discuss specific financial information or personal background information, I'm going to suggest to the fullest extent possible that we do so enigmatically, without saying numbers or actually citing materials out of that if we can, so we do not have to entertain a motion to close. But if it is absolutely imperative to close to talk about some specific financial or personal history information, we'll do that. But and I'm sure the BAG would appreciate not having to go through that if we can. Anyway, Ms. Rushton.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Kimberly Maxon Rushton with the law firm Cooper Levinson, proudly appearing on behalf of the joint applicants today for the joint application to sell and transfer 2 taxi certificates, one of which is referred to as Little C Blue Cab, the other as Henderson Taxi. Chairman, before I do the formal introductions and start my affirmative presentation, could I make a note with respect to the notice or the agenda?
Yes, please.
Yes, sir. Under Whittlesey Blue Cab, it notes the fact that there are 236 taxi medallions. That number is actually modified to reflect 286 taxi medallions.
286.
Yes, sir.
So there's a typographical error in that.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. And then with respect to Henderson Taxi, the number of the medallions as reflected in the agenda, 225, is correct.
I can be corrected by either Ms. Webb. I do not believe that clerical error impairs our ability to move forward today. And I reached that conclusion because any person who would have had an interest in 236 medallions transferring would have also had an interest in the additional 50 transferring, and no petition for intervention was filed. So under our regulations, were it our decision, we could dispense with a hearing and take a vote right now. So I don't think there's a defect, but I'll take counsel on that.
I think even with the typo, this item is properly agendized. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you. And again, for the record, I'm Kimberly Maxon Rushton with law firm Cooper Levinson. Joining me today for this joint application to sell and transfer the two respective taxi certificates. To my right is Mr. Bill George. He is the founder and CEO of Z-Trip. He is the applicant buyer. And to my left is Mr. Brent Bell, the president of Whittlesey Blue Cab and Henderson Taxi. Without question, members of the board, this is a historic day. Earlier in the week, we had a meeting with staff and the question came up as to when was the last time this industry had a new operator enter it. It's been over a decade. But it's because of the fact that this is an industry that has built itself on tradition. It's had a longstanding commitment to compliance. It's had a longstanding commitment to its drivers and to the safety of the traveling public. And that has made for a high threshold and a high bar for new entrants to come into the market. But now we have an exception, and that is someone as seasoned and as expert as in the operations of taxi operations as Mr. George. As you see in the packet of materials before you, not only does Mr. George operate Z-Trip in West Coast properties, but as you see that there are so many throughout the East Coast and the South that demonstrate the fact that this is not just a new operator to Las Vegas, but a seasoned operator that has ideas, commitments to his drivers, commitments to the safety of the traveling public, akin to what you've seen by Mr. Bell in his operation of both the taxi companies. So with that, I would note the fact that not only is this a historic day because of the new entrant into the market, but it's also a historic day because of the fact that the Bell family has been a staple in the commercial transportation industry in Nevada for decades. They've set the standard. They set the bar with respect to the type of service that is expected in Nevada. They set the bar for the type of operations that you want to see from a carrier. And most importantly, they set the standard for ensuring that the traveling public that comes to Clark County always has safe, reliable transportation. And like your other carriers today, they will tell you that this has been an ongoing struggle for the taxi industry since 2015. And yet, even with the entrance of the TNCs into the market and the downturn and the hurdles that we face, this is still a thriving taxi industry, to the point that someone as seasoned as Mr. George has an interest in coming in. And so for those reasons, I think that this is, again, an opportunity for the board to welcome a new operator that has a skill set exactly the way that you want to see, an opportunity to thank a seasoned operator who's done a wonderful job and been a trailblazer in ensuring that taxi service in Clark County is safe and reliable, and most important, always compliant. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. George to give you a background about himself and about his operations nationwide.
Welcome, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. We're very excited. It's been a dream of mine to enter the Las Vegas market. Actually, May of 2025 will be my 40th year in the industry. And I've been coming out here that long, and I've always admired the operation of the city, the growth, and the opportunity presented itself, and we are very excited to be here. And a little background, born and raised in Kansas City, and got into the business like almost everybody else did by accident. My father was a car dealer that was selling cars to a guy that had a cab company, and the guy went bankrupt without paying for the cars. And next thing you know, he was in the cab business. Built it up, sold it to the guy that had Yellow Cab in Kansas City, and I joined in 1985, and something happened then that really never happened before. We had 88% of the permits in Kansas City, and one day the city council decided to deregulate the market and said, whoever wants one, come and get one. And it was a typical business bloodbath that you had to go and refigure out the business. And in hindsight, it was one of the best things that could have happened because it gave us a 30-year head start of what the TNCs would do to the cab business in terms of trying to figure out how to make ourselves relevant in a market that had unlimited competition. And through that, we were able to re-engineer the company, come up with some new ideas, and we're successful in turning it around. In 1997, we sold it to a public company. My father left, and I stayed on to run it for them. And they got bought out by an international company, and 5 years later, I was able to buy it back and built it back up again. And in 2007, I sold it to Transdo, which is the Paris-based company that was one of the largest ground transportation operators in the world. Stayed on to run the Kansas City operation for them till 2010, and they named me president of their national taxi operations, everything in the U.S. And it was during that period that we created Z-Trip
to differentiate ourselves from the traditional taxi model and what everybody was appreciating about the TNC. So we tried to create a hybrid that took the safety, security, fare predictability, background check drivers, but put in newer vehicles, new technology that bridged the gap between the two. We created what we believe is the hybrid that allowed a taxi cab model to thrive in the world of TNCs. And we believed, and then we had great results. The problem was the people in Paris and the CEO at North America thought the taxi business was dead. And I approached them one day and said, I can't come to work every day with my bosses believing that we're going to fail. I said, why don't you sell the company? They refused to, so I left. And they said, why don't, before you leave, come back to us as a consultant. You can go do your own thing as long as you don't compete directly with us. So I formed WHC Worldwide. We did our first acquisition in April of 2018 in Omaha, Nebraska. And since that time, we've done 37 acquisitions, including finally all the Transdev companies in August of 19. And we've been able to go into markets and take our new approach to the business. Respecting each market is different. We know we can cookie cutter some things. We respect the individuality of each market. And quite frankly, Las Vegas, as I've sat here today, has had so many unique things that we appreciate those nuances and will uphold the tradition that Brent and his company have built over the years. But we, in the markets that we traditionally operate in, we focus on the niches where we excel at. That's service for the disabled, that's services to the neighborhoods. It is service to people that need it 24/7, 365 days a week, not just when it's raining or when there's a convention in town. And by doing that and focusing on these niches that we don't feel the TNCs do very well, we're able to go ahead and generate additional business for our drivers. And along with that, we have a unique recruiting program that basically was created from a problem that when we would go into a market, we would bring new cars in, new technology, and everything was great. And then when we left, the rumor mill would start. And what I always learned was the driver with the least amount of information was usually blessed with the largest mouth. And they would start spreading all these rumors. And so in order to counteract that, we created Facebook groups in each of our cities so that they could interact directly with us and say, if you have a question, let's get it out there and let us deal with it. Don't guess. And so we have a very robust group in each city. And one of the things that we took advantage of during the pandemic was we brought on some data scientists because we had all this data that we weren't doing anything with. And so we started really mining the data and we were able to come up with an objective score on our drivers, who provided the best customer service, who had the best safety record. And what we do now is we take that model, and we buy lookalikes on social media, and we target them. And for a fraction of the cost of what we were doing, we now generate over 10,000 driver applicants a month nationwide. And so what we're hoping to do in this market is respect the tradition, serve the existing community, but really go back to what Taxicab used to be in the neighborhoods for people that don't have other forms of transportation available to them and build the business back up and get unused permits back on the street. And it's a simple concept that we have honed through a lot of hard work and an incredible staff that we are going to combine with the Bell staff that will remain with us. And we think that we can really benefit the whole entire industry here. And when I was meeting with Administrator Park yesterday and his staff, he asked me, how do you look at the business? And the first goal is always safety. So when you go ahead and you look at safety and what we do on that end, which is extensive, the investment we've made, and then everything else you have to take from the lens of the customer. Because if you're providing great customer service, this circle continues where great supply leads to additional demand, which gets more drivers because their incomes are increasing, and it creates a happy environment. And it's, we don't do it perfectly all the time, but that's what the goal is. So, if we are fortunate enough to get your approval today, we look forward to moving on with this and introducing Z-Trip to the Las Vegas market. And hopefully we will be here with a lot of the issues you talked about today. As we progress forward, we can provide a voice to that along with the history that's here and some of our experiences in different cities and move forward in a very positive manner that benefits all the stakeholders.
And Chairman and members of the board, in most instances, when you have the joint application, the obligation is on the applicant buyer to demonstrate their suitability. why they are fit to operate in this market, what they will bring to the market, and how they will continue to ensure the safety and the compliance standards that you hold all operators to. But I think it's especially important in this instance to hear from the applicant seller. Because as I talked about before, Mr. Bell and his family's tradition and commitment to commercial transportation in the state of Nevada goes back farther than any of us, I can guarantee you, remember. But it set a standard. And so for him to now say he's ready to sell his company and to have the confidence that he has in Z-Trip is meaningful and impactful. And I think it's very important, again, that I take the opportunity to introduce Mr. Bell, not only to explain what his interest is in selling and why he feels like the Z-Trip is a good fit for him, but also recognition for all that he's contributed to the commercial motor carrier industry in Nevada.
Thank you. Thank you, Kimberly. Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Reeser, Vice Chairman Soderberg. Welcome. Member Weekly, it's been a while since I've appeared before you, County Commission, but I echo the chairman's comments. Your experience with the County Commission will not only help the traveling public, this board, and this industry. So welcome, and we're glad to have you here. Brent Bell, for the record, President Whittlesey Blue Cab, Henderson Taxi. First, I'd like to thank the staff, particularly Todd Parks and Attorney Webb, and I think Curtis is back here somewhere, for all their help in getting this application together. So thank you all for your time there. We really appreciate it. I'd like to share a little history with you, and I promise it will wrap up back up into the future and Bill purchasing our companies. But Whittlesey Blue Cab was founded by my father's uncle, Vic Whittlesey, back in 1941. Legend has it he won it in a poker game. I don't think there's anybody alive that can verify that now, but that's the legend anyway. He recruited my father in '67 to come help run the company. In 1970, as many of you know, my father founded the limousine operation to accompany the cab companies. In '79, my father and his brothers and sisters bought Henderson Taxi, which is also being sold today. And in 1981, my dad had the good fortune of a 18-year-old young lady coming from Cleveland, Ohio, to walk in the door and answer an ad, and that would be Cheryl Pauley. She's had 3 other names since then. I'm the only one that knows her maiden name. Cheryl answered the ad, and she came in and took a basic bookkeeping job. I think back in '81, minimum wage was even below $4 an hour. It was 3 something. But anyway, 3 years later, in 1984, I started pumping gas and driving tow truck for the company. Cheryl and I have basically been like a brother and sister ever since. She's had my back. I've had her back. She's even got my back today. And it's important to note that this, as most of you know, most businesses don't make it past the 2nd generation. We're on the 3rd generation, and I'm very happy that it's been successful. And Cheryl has an awful lot to do with that success. So I want to thank her, but also recognizing Bill and his team. Bill will be the first person to tell you, after getting to know him over the last 6 months, that he doesn't do it alone. He's got an incredible team behind him as well. And that team is about to get a whole lot better because he plans to hire Cheryl and many of her team members. So with that said, I feel like, this company's like one of my babies. Besides George and Cheryl, I think I've been here the longest. I've got Bill beat by 1 year. I've almost 41 years in the business. And it's time for new ideas, new innovation. Obviously, Bill has substantial experience that you just heard. And I think he will be a big addition that will really help this industry grow and prosper. So with that said, I would respectfully request that you grant today's application, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Chairman, that concludes our affirmative presentation, and as noted, we're happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Do you have any questions?
Well, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair and Mr. Vice Chair, I'll just say to Brent, man, it's bittersweet. You've been just an amazing person to this community for a long time. We thank you for all that you and your team, Ms. Polly, have offered to Clark County for a number of years. You both and you all have been so supportive of me over the years, and I can't thank you enough for that. To our applicant that's sitting before us, thank you for your introduction, sir. I love your experience, your suitability, as Ms. Rushing pointed out. Z-Trip, I'd be interested on whether that name come from. And then I also want to test you for a second here. What's your favorite WHC?
I'll tell you where it started. When I went to my banker, actually who I'm having dinner with tonight here, and told him I was going to get back in the cab business after selling it twice. And he looked at me and he said, "Are you an idiot?" And he told me why I shouldn't. I said, "Why hate cabs?" And we laughed about it. And that is WHC. But when you go through it, that's where it came from, and it really has played. But we hire champions is probably my favorite.
I love that.
That's because really that's what it is. I mean, we are people, vehicles, and communication, all three of which are subject to breakdown without any advance warning. And people are the ones that fix that, all three of them. And so that's the best. And you know, I'm able to do this here today because we have, in addition to about 3,600 drivers nationwide, we have about 780 employees as well. And as Brent mentioned, soon to add a lot more. And that's who does it. And so I'm just fortunate enough to lead that team.
Well, one of the things that will definitely win me over is you following that tradition that Brent and his team have done over the years with the Hope community. And they've always been very active and very involved and engaged in the community from a collegiate standpoint. What I do today with the Nevada System of Higher Education and the Brent's team, our rebel, they believe, rebel, if you will. But just that helping the community, I love that WHC.
And that's part of our last acquisition was in Dallas, in Fort Worth, in August of this year, a few months ago. And we are taking delivery now of 50 new wheelchair vans, wheelchair taxi cabs. And so we're one of the largest acquirers of wheelchair taxi cabs. And so we see there's a future there in that, and that's one of the ways that we weave all that together.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my first question is to Mr. George. I looked at your presentation, but I'm still don't have my arms around what is Z-Trip and what are you going to do outside of, you've acquired an already well-run cab company. What are you going to do that makes this different? You said you've responded to the rideshare issue decades before it came about. Why don't you just walk us through that?
Well, I'll tell you, when we talked about the hybrid model, one of the first things we did, everybody had strict color schemes. And the problem is drivers didn't want to drive old broken down taxi cabs. And when you had to buy a new car and immediately paint it, you destroy the resale value of that vehicle. And so one of the things we did is we petitioned to do away with standard fleet colors, but even though they're all decaled the same, but colors are different. So our model is we buy 1-year-old rental cars, and we buy them where the rental car company took the depreciation hit, and we keep them in service for about 24 months. And so by doing that, we have a better quality car that passengers like to ride in, and the drivers appreciate because they're not breaking down and not getting in where the seat's been, 5 years of sitting in it 24 hours a day. So that was one thing. The technology, really, we got out of the idea of how we dispatched and how we focused on the customer. So our technology and our dispatch system, we think is top notch. And a lot of it is the relationship with the driver. When we went and rebranded to Z-Trip and we had a historically yellow cab operations, we told everybody this isn't a paint job. This is a total rebrand, and it's how you treat the customer and how you go back and ask for the business. And one of our most profitable operations before this was in Pittsburgh, but it was the proverbial reason people hated taxi. The call center was understaffed. The cars were terrible. The fees to the drivers were so high, and drivers would sleep in the driver's room hoping somebody would quit or die so they could get a cab. But it was, if you were lucky, you got the call answered half the time, and about a quarter of the time you actually got picked up. And so when we changed that, and one of the other things we do is we encourage drivers to make personals out of the customers. One of the niches we do, especially as people return to the office, it's nice with the TNC. You can see who's coming to pick up your child 3 days a week to take them to practice after school, but you don't know till you hit the app. With our service, you contact the office and say, I have a need to do this. And we select a driver comes out, meets you, and that's your driver. And we encourage that, and the lease model allows that to happen. So it's a series of niches that we stitch together to create a viable business and serving different parts of the community in areas that we don't think the TNCs do a good job at. And also we're taxi companies, and you heard it today, strip, strip, strip. There's a big city here. And we know it's a challenge to get existing drivers to get out of that mentality of airport strip. But that's why our recruiting arm is so strong. And that's really, I think, the secret sauce that we bring to the market.
Okay, thank you. My question to Mr. Bell, I look at you, we've got 2 CPCs here. What's left?
Well, we're going through the same process with the company that you used to regulate when you were at the former TSA years ago, with Beltrans.
And you did a very fine job.
He did. So we're in the process of selling Beltrans as well. We will be hanging on to Bell United Insurance, which insures a lot of the, which insures Beltrans and a couple of my major limousine competitors. And we also insure a couple of tow truck companies in town. So I won't be retired completely yet, but I'm working on it.
Okay, well, before we get to anything else, I did want to echo Member Weekly's comments. I've worked with Mr. Bell, as he said, years ago. I think my very first hearing at the old Public Utilities Commission or Public Service Commission was Mr. Bell was there representing his family, opposing his friend Mr. Balaban's application. We all had a lot less gray hair then. But from that point on, I became familiar with the Bell family, and I've been impressed on the quality of what they do both in Northern Nevada and Southern Nevada in various segments of the industry. So, thank you, and thank the rest of your family. Generations have provided a great company, and whether it's true it was won in a poker game or not, that was maybe you could look at that as not only was the winner lucky, but maybe everybody else was lucky. I don't know who lost it, but what your family's done and helped take this industry and modernize it has been a benefit to everyone. So thank you for all your hard work, and good luck on your future endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. We've been very blessed.
That's it.
I'm going to begin by concurring with the comments about the Bell family and how much you've meant to the community and to the state, and how much that's appreciated. Now I'm going to get down to business. This is an asset sale?
That's correct.
So, okay.
But one of the assets he'll be purchasing will also be the name, and then it'll be up to Bill when he decides to do his rebranding. But he is getting the name Henderson Taxi, and we'll see Blue Cab, and all of the intellectual property is also deemed an asset that he'll receive as part of the sale.
What, Bill, will be happening to the employees at the current certificate holders?
The driver employees?
All the employees?
We are in the process, so the counterpart that is buying the limo operations, there's a lot of shared employees. So we have no interest in it. We will be co-buying the facility. But other than that, they will distinctly own the limousine side and we'll own the taxi side. So Cheryl will be coming with us, and the team that is dedicated to taxi, and the folks on the limo side will be going to a different company.
Do you anticipate a force reduction?
Not on the people that are dedicated to taxi. I can't speak to anybody on the limo side, but we need people and we will, we provide oversight. We'll bring recruiting people in. I actually, where we don't have staff, where I see now is on the recruiting side and on the marketing side. So we'll be adding there. And it really, a lot of it depends on the model on lease on that, really on maintenance. And mechanics are so hard to find that we don't want to lose anybody. But it's just, we're still going through which person, because one of the challenges of doing this deal was, okay, this person's a third over here and 2/3 over there.
Right.
We can't have that in this new operation.
Right. You have an app that people can put on their phone for Zcab. Right?
Yes, sir.
Is that proprietary? Is that your?
It is our app, but we will,
I'm
it
sorry.
is our app.
Okay.
So you'll be able to access our cabs through our app, but we will also have the curb app available.
Okay.
And one of the, questions that's come up repeatedly is universal dispatch and how that works. And I think there's some different ideas on that. And I look forward to working with my fellow operators, if approved, to discuss how we increase the availability of service. The cab business will, rise or fall depending on how unified we all are, because at the end of the day, people want to ride. And that was what your whole hour-long conversation was about the venues today. People really want to ride, safe ride. And so the ability for all of us to join together to provide that is critical.
You indicated in your affirmative presentation that in some jurisdictions you're deregulated.
We have everything from no regulations to strict regulations to some markets we actually operate as a TNC.
So that.
In some markets, we actually operate as a TNC.
Oh, you do? Okay.
It really just, it's market specific, but we're used to the whole gamut. This is, other than Pittsburgh, this is by far the most regulations, without a doubt, of any of the market we operate in, but Pittsburgh's probably the closest.
Do you have CPCNs in other jurisdictions?
Yes.
In what jurisdictions?
Pittsburgh, Kansas City, bear with me here. We have them in all markets. There's some type of permit there. Dallas and Fort Worth, we have individual ones for. Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Galveston. I'm trying to think of markets that aren't open entry. Albuquerque, Denver, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, Boulder, Omaha, Lincoln.
Okay, so quite a few.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yesterday, I was fingerprinted for the 30th time this year.
I would say that one.
I was fingerprinted for the
Oh.
30th time this
Yes,
year.
sir.
So
From my perspective, one of the strengths I think that you bring is that you're doing business in some markets that depend on resort casinos for business. So I'm not really, I guess, please respond if there is something to respond to, but that indicates to me that you have some level of experience with having to serve the gaming industry.
Biloxi, we're a Gulfport technically,
Right.
Biloxi, yes.
And you're in Indiana as well.
Right, Kansas City's got,
Colorado. Any concerns or any strengths or weaknesses that you think that your company has with regard to servicing the hotel casino industry?
well, we look at all of them as demand generators, and we're an extension of the property. And when people identify, when they land at the airport or they're being summoned up to a hotel, we have exclusives at many hotels because of the level of service that we provide. But they expect that it's an extension, that if the doorman puts you in this cab, it's a sign of trust. They don't do that on the TNC. And so there's an obligation there, not only to the passenger, but to the place that allows you to sit on their drive and take their guest. And so we respect that and we appreciate it. And what we try to tell them is you need to make one phone call if there's a problem. We take it from there. And instead of saying, well, it's a driver, it's an independent contractor, it's our problem because they're our representative.
Where do you office?
Headquarters is in Kansas City. I office out of a hotel room in an airplane. Uh,
How often would you expect that you would be on the ground in Southern Nevada? And in fairness, I would expect that that will be different depending on how long you've owned the company.
This is the largest acquisition we've made, and it's going to get that attention because it is a huge investment on our part. Fortunately, I love Las Vegas. I've been here a lot this year. I'm always here. It is my favorite place to visit. So the fact that we now have a business here that needs my attention, I plan on being here a lot. And resident is Scottsdale. So
say one more.
My residence is in Scottsdale. So I'm
Okay.
very close.
Right.
But we have staff. We're very decentralized. So we have many headquarters all over the country.
There was a bit of a snafu with your fingerprints, so you were printed yesterday, correct?
They were supplied back in July, and something happened.
Okay.
But I assure you, I pass all my back.
I assure you, I know that you've filed your prints, but you're aware that we haven't gotten FBI clearance on that yet.
Correct.
I'll ask your counsel, I'll let her swing at this first, but you may want to assist. My review of the application materials indicates that, well, before I ask this question, my understanding of the structure is that there will be a Nevada sub that will have a holding company above it. Also is the holding company for the various other regional operations, right?
Correct.
And so there's a sub at each one of these locations, Biloxi. So you're following that same structure. The capitalization, as I understand it, for the Nevada entity is 82.1% debt and 17.9% equity. We have a regulation that requires a 20% equity requirement. So unless I'm misunderstanding that, and I'll let you edify me if I'm misunderstanding that, I just need to understand if we're in agreement, there's a slight shortage there.
I think the issue is when the cars are brought in, the cars that we're purchasing puts us way above that number. And that is not shown. The cars will be provided by the parent, which go on the balance sheet of the sub.
It will go on the balance sheet of the sub?
It will be owned by the sub.
Okay.
So when we put the fleet in there, that
Okay, so there'll be assets coming in. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And that will show the parent having more equity based on that?
Correct.
We've had to grapple since I came to the board with some approvals being granted for CPCN transfers that were not consummated in a very timely way, and whether or not those orders had continuing life. So Ms. Maxim Rushton, whatever record you'd like to make on it's only one member pension here, will be to have something similar to NGC Regulation 4080, where there'll be a 6-month. Board may have a different view, but I think that's a fair guidance from another agency, so the order would have some end date on it if the transaction's not closed. Whatever record you'd like to make in response to that.
For the record, Kimberly Maxim Ashton. As a general practice, Chairman and members of the board, the TA and the NTA have set a compliance period between 90 to 120 days, with the flexibility that if the applicant buyer needs additional time to complete the transaction, to have the vehicles, put into operation, to have the staff, permitted properly. So as part of that, Chairman, what I would recommend is that the compliance period be for a period of 90 days. And then the order would state that if in the event that the compliance period is not met within 90 days, then we need to come back and ask for additional time, articulate the reason for it. And then upon the conclusion of the compliance period that you have set, it's at the time, if we've not asked for the extension and the compliance items have not been met, then we have to come back before you. I think that's consistent with the way that the procedural standards work under your specific regulations. So we would request, again, a 90-day compliance period in which to complete the underlying transaction, do the specific transfer of operations, and then if we need additional time, we'll come back, articulate the reason why we need the additional time and how much we need. And then at that period, if we've not completed it, I understand that staff will bring the matter back before you for further consideration of the application.
Are there any follow-up questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
with that 90-day condition that's being asked today, does that include all intellectual properties, name, all of that? Right. Considered about that as well?
That's correct, yes.
Mr. Chairman, the only question I have when we're dealing with these compliance periods, we're being asked to move forward here, but we don't have an FBI background for whatever reason. When do we anticipate getting that, and how does that fit within the proposed compliance period?
I believe that we'll have them back. Normally, we get them back within 2 or 3 months. They can take up to 6 months. The snafu that happened before was a download in the computer, which was done a while back. But we just wanted to make sure that in case that snafu's, Mr. George came in, gave his fingerprints again yesterday, just to make sure that it's going to get done. Hopefully, we'll get that first set back here pretty soon.
So what I'm hearing is if we approve this application with a 90-day compliance period, hopefully sometime in that compliance period, that will come back and you'll report to the board, you're comfortable or not comfortable, and here's why.
Correct.
Okay. That's my question.
For Ms. Webb's assistance, I believe we have jurisdiction to act in this matter pursuant to NRS 706-8818, subsection 1B and C. I would recommend that the board members concur with that. I would also ask the board members to concur that pursuant to NRS 706-8827, that the applicant has satisfied his burden of proof to establish the elements for the transfer and the grant of a CPCN, namely that the applicant is fit, willing, and able to perform the services of a taxicab motor carrier based on holding certificates in other jurisdictions and 40 years of experience. That we have reviewed that the proposed operation will be consistent with the legislative policies set forth in NRS 706-151. I think that finding is readily available to us because we are transferring certificates of the continuing operation. For that same reason, I think we can make the finding that granting the certificate will not unreasonably or adversely affect other carriers in the operating territory. And I think that's also shown by the fact there were no petitions for leave to intervene claiming contrary. There is a finding that we need to make that the holders of existing certificates will not meet the needs of the territory for which the certificate is sought. My view is that that is an inapplicable standard. In this case, we're transferring an existing certificate. So it is to maintain the number of certificate holders in the territory. Our final finding is that the proposed service will benefit the public and the taxi cab business in the territory to be served, Clark County. Obviously, I think that finding can be made. It's doing so today, and it will do so into the future. So I believe that the findings that we have to make under 8827 can be made. Mr. Park, has the applicant paid all fees as billed?
So far, yes.
And you, the authority did reserve the right under NAC 706-465 to conduct an investigation with the exception of the return of the FBI reports. Is there anything in connection with that investigation that is presented a concern that we should be aware of?
No concerns.
Okay. I would then recommend a motion to approve the application that we have made the finding that we have jurisdiction under 706-8819, that we have made the findings under 706-827, that there is compliance with NAC 706.465, and that we impose the following compliance terms. That prior to the issuance of the CPCN, the applicant shall have, the authority shall have received on behalf of the applicant a clearance from the Federal Bureau of Investigation such that we have can make the finding that he is fit, willing, and able, or that there's nothing contradicting that. That prior to the issuance of the CPCN or within 90 days thereafter, the applicant shall present evidence satisfactory to the administrator that the capital structure has been adjusted such that there is 20% equity demonstrated. That the compliance obligations are to be satisfied within 90 days of decision, but that the administrator, I recommend the administrator be granted discretion to extend for an additional 90 days. And if compliance is not had within that 180 days, the approval that we would issue today would expire, and unless some action comes back before us to change that. And that would be my suggestion of the proposed order.
Mr. Chairman, you've made it easy. All I have to say is so moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion from board members?
Not from me.
Administrator Parks, have I left out anything that that should be there that will make your life easier?
No, sir. Thank you. I did want to just say that I've met with Mr. George and hopefully a couple of times. Very impressed, and look forward to our future together. And to Brent, we have gotten to know each other a little bit, and I just a very short, when I worked over at the NTA, I was asked to go and do an operational inspection at Bell Transportation. Had no idea what I was getting myself into. Spent a week over there. And I'm very happy to report, very well ran, and I would expect that that will continue with Mr. George, so.
Ms. Rushton, anything you would like to add before the gavel goes down?
No, sir, we'd just like to take the opportunity to thank the board for your deliberations and consideration and approval today. But we'd be remiss if we didn't take the time to thank staff. Both Administrator Clark and Ms. Webb and Curtis have worked with us throughout this process. They've been involved with us every step of the way and ensuring that everything you see today, which I would respectfully submit looks pretty straightforward and easy. We wanted it to look that way. They spent a lot of time going through the financials, working with us on what the compliance period would look like. I'll continue to work with them on that specific area. And most of all, we just wanted to say thank you for your support and continuing assistance with this matter. And that's all. Thank you, Chairman.
The motion is in order. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? So carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, will you let Member Graff know that that takes us to agenda item 8. Administrator.
Thank you. Been a crazy month as a Taxicab authority. But one of my great pleasures is when we get new employees. And I would like to introduce Pete Gallagher, who has actually worked with our agency for not quite a year, but she just moved positions to be one of our dispatchers. So she's now going to take over the duties of the important duties of being a dispatcher for us. And her supervisor is here with her today. I think you guys recognize Marie. She's here quite a bit. And Marie will be training B, and I suspect that she will be just a phenomenal dispatcher like the other dispatchers that we have. The other thing that I would like to say before I get into the statistics, it's been recognized a few times today about our administrative attorney, Ms. Webb. She has worked here not quite a year as well, but she has come in and just helped this agency so much. I really kind of want to take one of her papers and show it to you on what her chicken scratch is, because I don't understand it, but then she produces just amazing results, and not just for you guys, but for our agency. I just wanted to recognize her for that. So, so going into the stats, our monthly trips, you can see they were down a little bit from last month, but October is normally one of our bigger months, but as we know, F1 is here and the construction starts, and I would suspect that is probably part of what that represents. Under the employee revenue trips, I believe that this still has the gas surcharge is for the reason why we show a red number on that. And same thing for the leases. For our monthly combined trip comparison between 23 and 24, if you dropped off the numbers that are in red from November and December, because we don't have those yet, we're actually, our trips are up about almost 19,000 or a little over 19,000 for the year. So I just wanted to point that out. The next page, the year-to-date comparison, that's just really a conglomeration of things just wanted to, or a side-by-side comparison. Our medallions have not changed. We're still at 3530. Our leases, we're up about 38 from last month for our lease decals. And then going into our agency stats, again, I want to say we're down several compliance enforcement officers right now. As we get people back in those positions, hopefully our numbers will get a little bit better. I believe our citations are still up from what we were doing a few months ago, a little bit down from last month, but staying, pretty steady in that area. I wanted to point out, we had one of our drivers was suspended, but that was for a medical reason. It was for no other reason, but one of the drivers was suspended for a medical reason. We had 4 people fail to appear. Normally what happens in those situations, they're treated as an FTA. Their driver's permit will be suspended until they come in and take care of business with us. The accidents, they're always really pretty close to the same. They're usually right around the same, which I don't know why, but it seems like they're always pretty consistent. Again, lost property, it's also a big number for us. Our complaints, I think 941 for the month. And that includes both the email and the phone complaints that we get. The citation violation report, we had 115 of those. That includes the impounds that we got as well as the citations that we wrote. The monthly vehicle report, our inspectors are still out there getting things done. Love those guys. They're just very good at what they do, and I appreciate the work with them. I wanted to point out too, the cabs in service. Right now we're at 3,097, and I'm going off of memory, but we had just broke 3,000 maybe back in March or April, so you can see that the cabs in service are going up. So unless you have some other questions for me, I kind of went through the stats a little bit fast today, but happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I have one question. Sure. For the administrator. Todd, I see we had 4 impounds for no CPCN.
Correct.
And I know that's not an easy enforcement activity, and you and I have discussed that, but it does seem like a drop in the bucket. So I guess that leads me to my question. Last meeting, we heard unverified that there was some operator actually making their cars look like cabs and operating, not as gypsy cabs, but I guess as faux cabs in the downtown area. Yeah. Were you able to get any more information on that? Or
I spoke with the deputy administrator about that, and he said that vehicle was identified. Do you want to speak to that?
I can, sure. Yeah, we follow up on a lot of these, and
Name for the record.
I apologize. Edwin Katie, Deputy Administrator for the Taxicab Authority. We follow up on a lot of them. The information was passed along to enforcement. Some vehicles do run around with the top hat, similar to a taxi cab that advertise Uber or just to get recognition to that vehicle. So the top hat alone or the lighted illumination on top of the vehicle isn't necessarily indicative of illegal rides.
okay.
It's out there. We're looking for it. There are challenges for enforcement staff, though.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. But as far as you know, that actually, that allegation was accurate. And it could be legal or could be unlegal. We just don't know yet.
Correct. Without staff being there, there's nothing outward to present it to being illegal. We assume that it's legal unless proven otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that, as well, the Uber Eats, that was something that was told us that that's what they do sometimes, is to have that little top hat on as well. It's definitely an issue. The industry knows it's an issue. It was brought up at the agenda for the NTA. Spoken about this issue. I wish it was as easy as everybody thought it was for us to go out and get these impounds, but with the small enforcement staff that I have, and I know that the NTA has, our guys get recognized. And when we show up at some place to do enforcement, the people that are doing illegal rides see us. They know who we are. They actually take pictures of us and pass those pictures around. They know where what our vehicles are and where we park. And then this big blast of messaging goes out to a lot of the illegal operators, and so they go to someplace else. And it's kind of a chasing them around type of situation. I would just throw out, I would love for anybody in the industry that wants to come out and ride with us on a ride along. I would be happy to take them out and have them see what we're up against as well. And we're trying to do, without giving too much information out, we're trying to do some proactive things to try to combat that situation. So,
Thank you. Okay. Do you have any questions on this issue? Ms. Webb, anything? Ms. Lee, anything? On future agenda items, I think we have noted them. December will see you on the surcharge order.
yes, sir.
And perhaps on some adjustment on the advisory committee, right? Any other future agenda items? Okay. Completes agenda item 8 and takes us to agenda item 9, public comment. This matter is on our agenda pursuant to NRS Chapter 241, Nevada Open Meeting Law, and is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on matters within our jurisdiction. We may not take action on those matters, but we welcome any comments from the public at this time. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address us present in the room in Las Vegas? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, is there anybody online that wants to address us?
No.
I am remiss. I should have addressed something at the beginning of the hearing. Member Becker is excused as a witness in a criminal case. So the record should reflect he had an excused absence. That concludes agenda item 9. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second the motion.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Our meetings are not normally this long. Normally this big amounts. I'm glad there's not a. I'm about 50-50.
Okay.
I'll come without it.
Oh, man, no, I'm ready to talk the next meeting.
My own boss.
I kept thinking I was done with it, and I should have put it in my car. So that's.